Imagine applying for a job, right? And the background check comes back, and it reveals that the college thesis you've been bragging about, well, it doesn't actually exist.
Oh, man.
Yeah, your graduation dates don't match up, and that military medal on your resume, completely false.
I mean, in the corporate world, you're just fired immediately.
Exactly. But in politics, you might just be the governor of Maryland.
Right.
So right now, Governor Wes Moore is facing a massive $1.4 billion budget shortfall. His approval rating has tumbled to 48%.
Which is pretty brutal.
It is, but the real firestorm right now is burning around his personal history. I mean, investigative journalists are aggressively pulling at the threads of his 2006 White House fellowship application.
And they're finding a lot.
A whole lot. They're uncovering a, quote-unquote, mything Oxford graduate thesis, a falsely claimed Bronze Star military medal, and an administration that is actively dodging questions from the media.
Now, real quick, before we dig into those actual documents, we have to put a massive asterisk on this conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
The sources we're looking at today, they come from highly charged, deeply partisan investigations, from both right-leaning and left-leaning media outlets.
Right. And our job here isn't to take sides.
Exactly. We are not endorsing the viewpoints of any of these political factions or media outlets. Our mission for this deep dive is simply to impartially report the raw facts, exactly as they're presented in the paper trail. So you, the listener, can clearly understand the arguments being made.
Right. Welcome to the deep dive. We are going to unpack how harsh fiscal realities, administrative transparency, and personal narratives all kind of collide.
It's a perfect storm.
It really is. And we're keeping the language simple and the facts front and center. Because look, before we look at any politician's past, you really have to look at what is happening to the voters' wallets right now.
Oh, absolutely. Financial stress is the match that lights the fire of public scrutiny.
Yeah, and right now, Maryland is staring down that projected $1.4 billion budget shortfall.
Which, I mean, that is a staggering hole to dig out of. And to understand how a state fixes a gap that large, you have to look at the actual mechanics of state funding.
So what's the strategy here?
Well, Governor Moore's strategy involves cutting spending, obviously, but more importantly, he's shifting money around from specialty funds. Like, they're pulling cash out of the Strategic Energy Investment Fund to help balance the main books.
Wow.
Yeah, and the administration argues this maneuver is, the most responsible way to avoid raising taxes on citizens who are already struggling.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because on paper, avoiding tax hikes sounds great, right? But raiding specialty energy funds to balance the main budget, that's kind of like raiding your kid's piggy bank to pay the electric bill.
Right, yeah.
Like, it fixes today's immediate problem, but what happens tomorrow when those green energy projects suddenly need capital?
Exactly. And plus, that whole we aren't raising taxes argument, it rings a little hollow to voters right now.
Because they just raised taxes by $2 billion, only 9 months ago?
Yep. The timing is just brutal.
Right. And if you own a car, I mean, you felt that pinch recently. Vehicle registration fees suddenly spiked to $192.
That's a huge jump.
It is. That's the kind of bill that sits on a kitchen table and just makes people furious.
And that financial pain translates directly into political vulnerability. I mean, look at the recent UMBC poll statistics.
Those were rough.
Very rough. Moore's approval rating has dropped to 48%. But the underlying numbers are even more telling. 59% of people surveyed say the state is on the wrong track.
Wow. 59%.
Yeah. And when asked specifically why they feel that way, 27% point directly at those raised taxes and fees.
Because that financial pinch, it fundamentally changes the psychology of the voter. When you're suddenly paying $192 just to register your Honda, you lose your sense of humor about government waste.
Oh, totally. You stop giving leaders the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly.
You're touching on a core dynamic here. When a leader promises affordability, but the public actually experiences high fees and budget deficits, trust evaporates.
Yeah.
This fiscal frustration creates this sort of zero forgiveness environment. People start demanding to know exactly what the government is doing behind closed doors.
Which perfectly brings us to the promise of transparency. Because Governor Moore actually made openness a huge part of his political brand.
He really did.
He literally signed something called the Transparent Government Act. But suddenly, these obscure administrative glitches are turning into massive scandals.
Because the administration is making some serious unforced errors. Let's look at the SNAP scandal. That's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program.
Okay, what's going on there?
Well, whistleblowers are currently claiming that state officials deliberately manipulated data related to the program.
Wait, break that down for us. Why would anyone mess with food assistance data?
But the federal government sets very strict error rate thresholds for SNAP. If a state issues too much food assistance or too little, the feds audit them.
Right.
And if that error rate is too high, the federal government hits them with millions of dollars in financial penalties.
Oh, wow. So they were trying to hide the errors.
Exactly. The accusation is that Maryland officials felt so much pressure to avoid these massive federal fines that they went in and altered the raw error data before submitting it to Washington.
Making the state look way more competent than it actually was.
Yeah.
Man. So it's a cover-up to avoid a federal fine. And then on the completely opposite end of the spectrum, you have the massage scandal.
Oh.
Yeah. The Department of Human Services employee literally billed taxpayers $400 for personal massages.
Which is just crazy.
I mean, in the grand scheme of a $1.4 billion budget, $400 is nothing. But again, when voters are paying registration fees, expensing a massage is just an absolute insult.
It really is. But the real issue isn't just that these things happen. I mean, large governments always have bad actors. The real issue is the administration's response. When investigative outlets like Spotlight on Maryland try to ask detailed questions about this SNAP data or the massages, they hit a brick wall.
Total silence.
Total silence. The administration completely ignores their questions and even excluded them from press availability emails.
I mean, Moore's team is defending themselves pretty hard on this, though. They claim the governor is incredibly accessible.
Right. They point out he's done over 80 interviews this year.
Yeah. But wait, let me push back on that.
Oh.
If you do 80 interviews with friendly reporters who just ask you about your upcoming policy goals, but you totally dodge the reporters asking about $400 taxpayer-funded massages, does that really count as transparency?
No, and that is exactly what we call the transparency trap.
The transparency trap.
Yeah, it's a fascinating psychological phenomenon. If a politician never promises to be an open book, the public expects a little bit of spin and stonewalling. We bake it into the cake.
Right. It's just politics as usual.
Exactly. But when a leader makes transparency their entire brand, hiding even minor administrative scandals, looks like a massive betrayal.
Because it highlights a massive gap between what you promised and what you're actually doing.
Exactly. And when an administration stonewalls questions about current events, investigative journalists don't just go away.
No, they pivot.
They inevitably start digging into the politician's past to see what else might be hidden.
And that pivot leads us right to the resume, specifically a 2006 application for a White House fellowship.
This wasn't just any document.
No, this was the application that essentially launched Wes Moore's entire political career.
It absolutely put him on the map. I mean, he was a 27-year-old veteran applying for one of the most highly prestigious federal positions in the country.
But recent investigations by the Washington Free Beacon and the Baltimore Sun, they've pulled this specific document out of the archives. And they're putting it under a microscope.
Yeah, and the findings are glaring. Let's start with Oxford University. On this application, Moore claimed that his master's thesis research led him to be touted as a foremost expert on radical Islam.
Right, but the thesis, which he explicitly stated was titled The Rise and Ramifications of Radical Islam in the Western Hemisphere, well, it's completely missing from Oxford's famous Bodleian library.
Completely gone. And top scholars who study political Islam say they have literally never heard of him.
Which is wild.
And to understand why a missing thesis is such a huge red flag, you have to understand how the Bodleian Library operates. It functions as a legal deposit library.
So it's not just a public library where someone checks out a book and loses it.
No, not at all. Its cataloging system is rigorous. Every single thesis approved for a master's degree is bound, indexed, and archived. It's an airtight system, so a document just vanishing is a massive anomaly.
Hold on, though. Not just missing, but didn't they find that the title was completely different, too?
Entirely different. When investigators finally pulled his official Oxford degree confirmation, the thesis title on the certificate did not match the one on his fellowship application at all.
Unbelievable.
And there are major timeline discrepancies, too. His application offered conflicting graduation dates of 2003 and 2004, but the university's official records show he didn't actually finish until November 2005.
Wait, let me play devil's advocate here.
Okay, go for it.
A missing thesis from 2005. I mean, Oxford is massive. Things get misfiled. And misremembering a graduation year by a few months. Who hasn't had to double-check their own resume?
Sure.
Are we sure this isn't just a 27-year-old being incredibly sloppy with his paperwork rather than some grand conspiracy?
That is the defense his team uses. But context matters immensely here. We aren't talking about a rough draft for an entry-level job.
Right. This is the White House.
This is a formal application for a federal White House fellowship, a position that grants extraordinary access. The expectation of accuracy is absolute.
You don't just guess your graduation year on a federal form.
You really don't. And that sloppy paperwork defense, it completely falls apart when you look at his military record on that exact same application.
Ah, right. The Bronze Star.
Yep.
On that same 2006 application, he falsely claimed he had received a Bronze Star for his service in Afghanistan.
Exactly. You do not accidentally claim a high-level military medal.
No, you don't.
Moore has had to address this publicly. He stated it was an honest mistake. He explained his commanding officer nominated him for it and instructed him to just put it on the application assuming it was already approved.
But that is not how military awards work. You don't get to wear the medal or put it on your resume just because someone submitted the paperwork.
Right.
And the timeline here is wild.
Yeah.
The interesting footnote is that Moore actually did eventually receive that Bronze Star, but he got it 18 years later in 2024.
Only after a close friend resubmitted the paperwork following media inquiries.
It just creates a pattern. And it isn't just professional paperwork either, it's deeply personal family lore.
This one is really interesting.
Yeah, he frequently claimed on the campaign trail that his great-grandfather was chased out of the United States by the Ku Klux Klan.
Which is a powerful, dramatic narrative of overcoming historical oppression.
Right. But investigative journalists went back and checked the historical church records. And those documents show his great-grandfather actually made a routine, highly public, professional transfer to Jamaica to take over a new church.
Now, his communications team pushes back hard on this. They argue this was an oral history passed down through generations.
Okay.
And they correctly note that racial intimidation was a pervasive, horrifying reality in the Jim Crow South. Family stories often reflect that broader trauma.
That makes sense. But the historical documentation, the actual paper trail, paints a very different picture. It shows an orderly, celebrated professional move by a well-documented church leader.
So we have to ask the uncomfortable question here.
Yeah, we do. Are these just a series of unfortunate paperwork mistakes and messy family rumors? Or are we looking at a perfectly manufactured origin story, carefully focus grouped, and designed to win elections?
And that is the core ethical debate that voters have to weigh. Embellishing a resume is somewhat common in the corporate world, unfortunately.
True.
But doing it systematically on a federal application to gain a powerful White House position, that changes the conversation. Did he fundamentally misrepresent his character to gain federal power?
So when a politician's entire life story is challenged like this, with receipts, how do they survive the fallout?
Well, the political playbook says you attack the motivations of the people asking the questions.
Right, and that is exactly the mechanism we are watching play out in real time.
It is textbook crisis management. Moore refuses to answer direct questions about the missing thesis or the mismatched dates.
Instead, he doubles down on the KKK story.
Yes. He frames himself as a person of honor and integrity who has never exaggerated his life, and then he goes on the counterattack.
He blames quote-unquote conservative right-wing blogs for engaging in the politics of personal destruction.
And he specifically points out that the Baltimore Sun, which has been aggressively investigating him, is now owned by David Smith.
Right, the billionaire tied to Sinclair Broadcast Group.
Exactly. Moore basically accuses Smith of manipulating local media to run a smear campaign and curry favor with Donald Trump.
We really have to examine how this specific PR tactic works, because it is highly effective.
Very effective. By framing the investigation as a partisan hit job orchestrated by right-wing billionaires, Moore successfully short-circuits the public's critical thinking.
He shifts the focus completely.
Suddenly, the debate isn't about a missing Oxford document or a false Bronze Star. The debate becomes about the secret motivations of newspaper owners.
But think about that logic for a second. Does a reporter's political motivation actually change the physical reality of a document?
No, it doesn't.
If a billionaire hates you, does that magically erase your thesis from the Bodleian library catalog? You have to separate the messenger from the math.
And that is the heaviest burden placed on the modern voter, separating the spin from the substance. But, looking at how top politicians navigate these scandals leads us to an incredibly stark contrast.
Oh, the double standard is wild.
It really is. While high-level politicians fight these massive PR battles over their truthfulness, everyday government workers face a deeply unforgiving reality.
Let's look at the standard of accountability for normal people. The sources provided data from the June 2025 Board of Ethics and Government Accountability newsletter.
BGA.
Yeah, BGA. They operate in neighboring Washington, D.C., overseeing ethics for normal government employees.
And the mechanisms of enforcement there are brutal. According to the newsletter, BGA forced a former employee to pay a $26,000 fine for misusing a government purchase card.
And they don't just go after massive fraud. The oversight is incredibly granular.
Oh, yeah.
They slapped a $2,500 penalty on an employee simply for running physical fitness classes while they were technically on duty.
Wow.
Yeah. They caught another employee claiming to be working their regular schedule while records showed they were actually on vacation out of the country. That was another $2,500 fine.
The system just doesn't accept honest mistakes from low-level workers. BGA enforces strict, automated deadlines. If a government employee is even slightly late filing their mandatory financial disclosures, BGA institutes immediate $300 wage garnishments.
The enforcement is swift, financial, and completely undeniable. It really puts things in perspective.
It does.
I mean, think about it. A regular employee gets fined thousands of dollars for lying about their time card, but a top politician gets a pass for potentially fabricating major elements of a federal application.
It's crazy.
It's like grading a group project where the boss gets an A just for showing up and the intern gets fired and fined for being 5 minutes late.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. And when everyday citizens see swift financial ruin for low-level workers, but zero consequences for high-level officials manipulating their histories, it breeds deep cynicism.
It validates the voters' worst fear, that the rules only apply to the people at the bottom.
Exactly.
Well, we've covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with the sheer math of Maryland's $1.4 billion budget deficit.
And how that financial squeeze makes taxpayers hyper-vigilant.
Right. We examined how an administration that promised total transparency is now dodging questions about altered federal SNP data and $400 massages.
And we unpacked the structural damage to a governor's golden resume.
From a thesis that simply doesn't exist in the Oxford archives, to an 18-year timeline gap on a Bronze Star, to church records contradicting family lore.
And through it all, we watch the mechanics of modern political defense, shifting the blame to media bias to deflect from producing actual documents.
Navigating this kind of intense information overload is exactly why this deep dive exists. Our goal is to strip away the political spin and just look at the raw facts. But before we wrap up, we want to leave you with something to chew on.
Yeah, it raises a deeply uncomfortable question about us, the voters. If our modern political machine only rewards candidates who present flawless, superhero-like origin stories, are we the ones forcing our leaders to blur the lines of reality just to get a seat at the table?
It really makes you wonder. The next time you see a rising political star with a resume that looks just a little too perfect, will you just admire the shine or will you start looking for the cracks?